We're coming to you from the DraftKings.com podcasting studios. DraftKings.com, America's one-day fantasy sports site, where it's like a new season every time you play. DraftKings.com.
From ESPN's Pod Center, this is NBA Lockdown.
All right, welcome into the latest NBA Lockdown podcast. We are taping this on Monday, May 4th. We're doing it every day right now in these NBA playoffs. I am Doug Kezirian. We'll be joined shortly by Amin Elhassan and the lovely Cari champion who hasn't slept in 72 hours, still partying from Las Vegas.
This is true. I resemble that remark.
On the podcast, we'll talk about the Spurs try to put a bow onto their season, but is it a bow on their dynasty and the five-time champs? We'll see what's in store for Duncan and Pop and the rest of the Spurs. We'll also look at the Eastern Conference, the red-hot Washington Wizards and the Golden State Warriors, but we're going to start with the most valuable player, Steph Curry, picking up 100 first-place votes of a possible 130. One ballot actually had him fifth. Not sure about that. But no real surprise on my end, guys. Maybe the only surprise is that it wasn't a little bit closer. But we did an ESPN.com poll a couple weeks ago, and the what is that called, a straw poll, was suggested it would be a one-sided affair.
Not at all. I mean, Again, there's my cape billowing in the wind. Oh, man. Steph Curry, he was the best player, pretty much start to finish. When you look at his impact from a statistical standpoint, what the team was like without him on the floor versus with him on the floor, when you watch him play, when you see this is the best team in the league, by far one of the 10 best teams of all time in regular season wins, I mean, to me, it was not a tough decision. It shouldn't have been a tough decision. And I think, we gave credit, and credit was due to James Harden because he had a heck of a year and, under really tough circumstances in Houston. But I think a lot of the numbers people pointed to about James Harden were inflated because he had to play a lot of minutes. Steph Curry, I keep saying this, he was so good, he could sit out a fourth quarter 19, 20 times this year. That's not because the team was great. That's because he was great and he made them a great team.
You know what's interesting, and I think that we all agree he did deserve it. And as you mentioned off the top, Doug, I did think it was weird that James Harden didn't get more votes, but it's neither here nor there. I always marvel at the fact that we can watch a player like Steph Curry, who 3 years ago couldn't even be on the All-Star team, to now being the MVP. He was on the show at the All-Star game in Houston, and he was participating in a three-point contest. And I remember Mark Jackson making a huge fuss saying, "This is outrageous, this kid's not an All-Star. Are you guys kidding me? Do you even watch this? Do you even pay attention to what we're doing?" And here we are, fast forward to today, and rightfully so, one could argue he's been the MVP for a minute or at least overshadowed, and he deserves this award. It's good to see him being properly rewarded in the right way. And what they've done this season, you just can't beat it. What is his record with Magic Johnson? The 2-point guards going to the postseason with 62, 65?
At least 65 wins, and to be a point guard who led your team in scoring.
And for you to be on Magic Johnson's level at this age in your career is great. Because
I believe it was the 86-87.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and Ethan Strauss wrote a great piece today on ESPN.com. I encourage everyone to go check it out. Basically, he was saying Curry was as dominant this year as Shaq was in his prime. Shaq, there's different, I can't remember the verb, but it's like, Shaq imploded defenses and Curry forced defenses to stretch, and they both crushed double teams, basically. That's what they were saying. And this year, there were more three-pointers attempted in the NBA than ever before. So that's where the trend is, the NBA, maximizing 3 versus 2 points, all the analytics. And Curry just crushed everyone. And you talked about not playing the fourth quarter, and I really, there's been some people who say, well, this would be a 50-win team without Curry. That's laughable. I'm sorry. It is. Not in the Western Conference, not with these other good teams. It just wouldn't. I mean, they'd be good. They'd be like about 40 to 45. I don't think people have watched them enough on the road on how huge he was in the regular season. When role players, as you know, Amin, and most NBA fans know, role players just don't have it on the road.
Right. And, Doug, I think what people need to remember, it's so funny. They've been so good this year that it's clouded our perceptions. Like, of course the Warriors are always a championship contender. No, they were a 50-win team last year. They won 51 games. So, and nobody had him on their MVP ballot a year ago.
No one's
and even going into
exactly.
Going into the summer, I don't think anyone remembers this. They asked Steph Curry, who's the best player in the NBA, and he said, I am. And they said, no, not best defensive player. He's like, no, I'm the best player in the NBA. He said that when he was with Team USA, and everyone laughed and said, what is this crazy kid talking about? And again, I don't think anyone's saying that they take Curry over LeBron in general. But when we look at the body of work this season, he was the best player in the NBA. Nobody saw this coming. I'm sorry. He's 100% deserving of this.
Yeah, Steph Curry's brother, it was interesting on that I think it was the East 60 piece we aired. He said it used to be everyone would be like, oh, you're Dell's son. Now it's like, oh, you're Steph's father. And I think that's what a way to end his season that way. He deserves it 100%. So it's interesting that we're talking about MVPs because also I want to make this note, and your boy Doug told me stop being a fan. I thought it was interesting that my boy RW didn't get a vote. And I know he's not in the postseason, but is that fair? Man. A single vote?
Well, here's the thing, Cari. This is why. So it's not like try to make everyone feel better. If you had one vote, but it's not. If you had one vote, who would you vote for MVP?
You already know who I vote for.
First place.
Curry.
First place vote.
I'd give it to Curry.
So that's my point. So
I'm just saying I can't believe there's not somebody, but I can't believe there's not anybody at all who had the same thought that perhaps Westbrook deserved one.
Would the Thunder have missed the playoffs without Westbrook?
And I don't even think LeBron even deserved three. Like he sat out for the season.
Hey.
Like how did he get three first place votes?
You're preaching to the choir here, Cari.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Choir because I said it.
Yeah, I had an issue with anyone who didn't vote for Curry or Harden.
No, you know what? If someone voted, I know he didn't get any first place votes, but if someone had voted Anthony Davis,
no,
that would not have bothered me either.
I would not have bothered me.
Yeah.
But LeBron, again, I say it again and again. If you take November and December off because you don't like your roster, you're not the MVP. Sorry, that's
#hate hard.
You already know your mentions are going to be blown up once this airs.
Couple fun facts, by the way.
Give us some fun facts.
Brian Windhorst says Steph Curry was not only also born in Akron, born in the same hospital as LeBron James.
No way.
Wait, so tell me what's the name of the hospital because apparently I need to have children there.
I'm taking a wife. I'm taking a wife to Akron.
Yeah.
Jason Sobel, who covers golf for ESPN.com, says Steph is basically a scratch golfer.
Okay.
He's got a .1 index.
All right. Thanks for that.
I've heard
that's not fair that he's arguably the best shooter of all time in the NBA. He's also a scratch golfer.
You know what's funny? Like there's in the NBA at least, it seems to be a lot of these guys who, if they're these gifted at every single thing they do. Meaning, if I had set my mind to playing this sport instead of basketball, I'd still be one of the best in the world. It always trips me out. I always talk about Steve Nash with soccer, Grant Hill.
But why does that surprise you?
I don't know. It's just because it seems so different. Because I've seen NFL players who are supposed to be good at basketball, and I don't think they're very good. I think, you're good in a pickup game. You're not good enough to play at this level. But in the NBA at least, it seems like we have a lot of guys who are legitimately good enough. I'm not saying they'd be great at these other sports, but they're legitimately good enough to be professional level players, and that always blows my mind.
Yeah, I'm never really surprised when they're good at another sport just because they're so competitive. Hey, listen, it's not a competition. I just wanted to tell you, just giving you some insight. I mean, I don't like when I join in and you don't like it. I think you need to be more happy when you hear me on the podcast. I don't like it at all.
I'm always happy.
All right, let's put a bow on the Steph Curry talk. I finally found the line Ethan Strauss used that really resonated with me. Shaq bashed defenses till they broke. Steph stretches defenses till they snap. And he's basically a dominant player, and that's what I was talking about earlier in the year. If you look at opposing defenses, when he just crosses half court, the team, 3, 4, 5 guys are all worried about Steph shaking in their boots. We saw a little bit of that yesterday. Steph was in somewhat MVP form, wasn't really needed as the Warriors handled Memphis Grizzlies yesterday, playing without Mike Conley with the facial fracture, surgery, whatever it is. He just doesn't look good, couldn't play with the mask. So Grizzlies already overmatched in my eyes and playing undermanned without Mike Conley, lose game one. And I honestly think this will be the sweep, guys. What do you guys think?
A sweep. I don't know. I like what our colleague PJ Carlesimo said. Sometimes they just get sloppy.
They do?
So if in fact, and he knows what he's talking about, if in fact that does happen, and that does happen in series, you do lose your focus. You do lose your train of thought because it is so easy and you have that are we there yet mentality. I could see, out of respect, I can see the Grizzlies getting a game. Like, I just wouldn't want
Maybe game 3 or something.
Yeah, a gentleman's sweep. I wouldn't want them to. I wouldn't want them to disrespect them that way. But you're right. You don't have Conley. It's going to be tough for them to actually really compete in this series, unless, like I said, the Warriors lose focus.
Yeah, I would. Here's my thing. I said this last week, and apparently it rubbed a lot of people in Middle Tennessee the wrong way, in Shelby County. I said, if Mike Conley doesn't play, I'm picking Warriors in 3 because there will be no point in playing Game 4.
That was me laughing again. You're so funny.
And so I heard they were like, they just don't watch the Grizzlies enough. They don't know the grit and grind, and this team has too much pride. And what happened to all that pride yesterday? They got slapped around silly. The Warriors played with them like an overgrown toddler playing with like a broken toy, just kind of picking it up and throwing it around and having its way with it. So, again, if Conley doesn't play in Game 2, Game 2 is a wrap. If Conley doesn't play in Game 3, Game 3 is a wrap. But here's the thing. We saw Conley warm up with the mask on. We saw him give it a go. He's listed as doubtful for tomorrow. But it would not surprise me if he came back sooner rather than later because they know the deal. I don't even have to say it myself. They know in that locker room. If Mike Conley doesn't play, there's no chance that the Grizzlies have to even make this competitive.
Well, I just think it's a bad matchup. I actually incorrectly picked the Pelicans to win 1 and maybe even 2 games. I just like that matchup. I thought number one thing you need when you play the Warriors, you have to have enough scoring because they will get kind of bored. They will have some cold. At least some of the guys might be cold for a couple games. But I don't think – I mean, the Grizzlies are a nice team. I just think it's a horrible matchup for them. Even with Mike Conley, they can't score and maintain at that pace. I think they'd beat other teams in these playoffs in a series in the second round and get to the conference finals, but I just don't think they can hang at all with Golden State.
I agree with you. It's interesting. I told you this on the podcast. I don't know if you were on this one, Doug, but I told you, that I was at an event probably last month, and Dwayne Wade said he thought that Memphis would come out of the West. And
I remember that.
And I thought so. He said because they have all the pieces, they look like the more solid team on paper. They seem like they could do it. And I thought to myself, no, not. But obviously this was before Conley was injured and not playing. But I don't know. It was before. Say if he's in the game, do we see this being more competitive?
They do have the pieces, but
do you see them beating the Warriors if Conley was playing?
I think it's a horrible matchup for Memphis because I think we're also overlooking that the Warriors had the number 1 defensive efficiency team as well. So they're not just a team that bombs threes. They're not just the Phoenix Suns of about a decade ago.
The other thing we're missing about them is that the Grizzlies were very good over the last two and a half months of the season. I mean, we can't ignore that.
Yeah,
they were. Cari, I want to say Wade told you that during All-Star break, correct?
No. That was last month.
No, it wasn't. That's right. It was after the season.
Month. It was
you were down in Miami.
Yeah.
That's right. I remember.
Right, yeah. Maybe because it was the postseason and he had nothing to do. I don't know. What do you think? Just making up stuff.
Memphis does have championship pieces. It's not a crazy prediction.
It's not a crazy. I'm being funny. No, it's not a crazy prediction. But obviously Conley was healthy and he was. But I even thought with a healthy Conley they couldn't come. I just didn't think they could come out of the West.
I would be okay picking Memphis against any other team in the West.
Okay,
Golden State.
But that's how we see the game. It's interesting. So when the players have their awards and they announce who they believe is MVP, they see the game totally different than the way we see the game. So it'd be interesting to see who they think the MVP is. But his whole point was like he loves the way they play, just watching them, the way that they execute it. In his mind is the way a team should if they want to advance out of the West. So not that it's a crazy pick. They just see the game so differently than we do.
You're right. It's interesting because it is a player
yes.
and a guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer.
Right.
No, you know what? And I, like you guys said, it's not a crazy pick, man, because Memphis, remember, they play a style that's very different from the rest of the NBA. They play a very throwback style. So I think there is some appeal there. That's like, while everyone else is trying to play this way, these guys are getting it done doing it this way. And I think that is admirable because I've always been a believer There's no such thing as this is the way you do it to win a championship, or jump shooting teams don't win championships. That's all trash. You have talent, and your job is to make sure the talent is in the best position possible to compete for a championship. And whether that's playing inside like the Grizzlies or playing mainly jump shooting like the Warriors or maybe the Mavs in the past or even the Heat and the Spurs, there are many ways to a championship. But they're outmatched.
And I'll come back. Their defense too. Golden State improved to 44-0 this season when they hold their opponent under 100 points. And given it's Memphis, I don't see them getting past the century mark the rest of the series. Maybe if Mike Conley returns for games 2, 3, or 4, whatever, he might do it. Obviously, you'd love to see him healthy just as a fan.
I know.
No more injuries, please. But right now, if the facts are that and Conley's out, it doesn't look good for Memphis.
It doesn't. I wish it was better.
All right, so that takes care of yesterday's Game 2 of the doubleheader. Game 1 also on ABC. The 1 seed in the East did not look like the 1 seed as opposed to the Warriors looking like the 1 seed in the West. Atlanta had a nice lead but shot, I want to say, 25% in the second half and also less than 18% in the fourth quarter, went ice cold. Even Kyle Korver was missing. And the Washington Wizards remain undefeated in these playoffs.
Somebody's saying that with a lot of chest hair.
Game 1 at the Highlight Factory.
Someone's saying that with a lot of chest pounding. That would be the guy
Give
to my
Randy
right.
Whitman a 10-year extension.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. I think that's for you specifically, I mean.
No, man. First of all, let me tell you guys something about Doug.
Tell me about Doug.
He did pick the Wizards earlier in this, after I think it was in March or so. He did sing their praises. But Doug, you were right there with me at the end of the year, damning them to all damnation. So don't pretend like you've been on the screen the whole time. You got off for a couple of stops.
Of course. We were seeding them 1 through 8 as we were in the March Madness spirit. We were seeding them, all the teams in 1 through 8. And I was arguing for the Wizards around 7 or so. And I was like, well, right now, the Clippers have no Jamal Crawford. They're playing. So it was the argument of who do you put them ahead. And I obviously didn't have them 1. I had a lot of other teams ahead of the Wizards. But I thought talent-wise, and I thought they were frisky. And they did go out and beat Portland that night. So I looked good early. And
they
I
were
still
frisky,
good.
so he says. Look at all this ego involved in these predictions. Sometimes we get them wrong, guys. It's not a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes we get them wrong. It's not a big deal, guys. Most times, okay? But it's interesting, and I know people are going to, really hate that I'm saying this, but the Hawks are who I thought they were. And I don't want to say that the series.
They are who we thought they were.
Thank you. One more time, please.
They are who we thought they were.
Because it sounds better coming from that guy. I didn't say it. That guy said it. I wanted to believe. I really, truly did. Because for my own selfish benefit, I would love to be. If I had to do the East, I'd love to be in Atlanta as opposed to Cleveland, right? So if I'm traveling, I'm all like, I'd like to be in Atlanta.
Hashtag hate hard.
I just would. Have you been? Have you been to Atlanta?
I think Joakim Noah agrees with you.
Yeah. Everyone's smiling and laughing. And I don't think it's going to be a sweep. I think that they are going to play well. But the reality is the Wizards are really coming together. And just for my own selfish motivation, too, tell me about Paul Pierce. Don't we want to see him? Like, that's a true veteran. And he plays the playoffs like they want. Like, we should want to see them being played.
Here's the thing. You can speak to this, too. The big difference that they've done in the postseason versus the regular season, they've moved Paul Pierce to the 4.
Yes.
John Small, Otto Porter at the 3. And they couldn't do that during the regular season because, it's 82 games. Paul Pierce, given he's 17 years, I believe.
They brought him here for this. That's why they brought me here.
You just couldn't do that all regular season. It's a different season, as you've heard so many times. Randy Whitman figured it out. Was going with his best offense. Brooklyn was at their best a year ago when Pierce played the 4, and they went small ball. So when Pierce is playing the stretch 4, Washington's a better team. Can't log all those minutes that way. He can't take the pounding, but he's rested. He's preserved. This is actually the role I want Kobe to do for another team, a contender. Not the stretch 4, but I wanted him to go somewhere where he could have monitored his minutes and had a title run with someone that needed him.
Yeah, but he's not going to do that.
No,
he will be right. He'd be a good piece.
Right.
Yeah.
He should have done this. But anyways, but what are you seeing, with the Wizards? I'm not ready to pick the Wizards in the series like Cari is.
I am only as well because I feel like, and we're watching, John Wall, he really is coming into the true leader of that team he's supposed to be. And I haven't seen that in the past, he's always had some issues where I thought he didn't handle himself maturely. He's always been a good kid, period. But I was just like, he's just not quite there yet. It's almost like this maturation process that you watch unfolding. And it's just, we're not talking about CP3, but it's just his time. He was not, the Spurs weren't supposed to win. CP3 wanted it more than the Spurs wanted it, obviously, with a little help from the refs. But I can't say that I'm really comfortable with that combination. I feel like it's time for the Wizards, and it could even go to 7, but I think they'll get it at the end. I feel like they're much more hungry than the Hawks, and they've been there.
I mean, what's your take after Game 1?
Man, I've given up on trying to figure out the Wizards. Honestly, I think the Hawks in this series, and I just don't know what Wizards team shows up. Is it the team that played 82 games in this frustrating style that made us all really question them heavily on the eve of the playoffs, Doug? And when I say us, it includes you.
I may or may not have picked the Raptors in round 1. Can't remember.
You can't remember? Do we have the audio?
The audio, yeah. But the other thing is they play in the playoffs, and this is the second year in a row this has happened. They just play differently. They take smarter shots. They're not, they don't settle for those mid-range jumpers. And yesterday, I thought for much of the game, they got outplayed. And then at the end, they just turned it on and said, you know what? We're not going to be those same old Wizards. We're going to be the playoff Wizards.
The Hawks missed shots, too. I mean, come on. Jeff Teague missed a wide-open 3, the top of the key with 2 minutes to go. Korver missed a somewhat contested. I mean, Hawks just missed shots, too. And I'm not saying the Hawks are great because they're going to have to make those shots, and there's no telling the Wizards still could have won the game. But at the end of the day, when it's a 2-point game in the fourth, one team makes a play, the other team doesn't. I think the verdict is still out on this series. A lot of basketball still to go.
That's fair. I still have the Hawks winning because people call me a hater a lot of times. Say, oh, they don't believe in us, da-da-da-da, and I'm always like, you're crazy, man. Like, when I say something, I put heavy analytical thought into this, whether it's the stats, whether it's me watching and scouting, whatever. Hey, I'm 100% admitting right now, I don't get the Wizards. I just don't believe in them. I don't believe they can keep doing what they're doing, and if that makes me a hater, so be it.
So be it.
And Cari brought up the big difference between this year's team and last year's that had a 2-1 series lead in the second round and blew it is Paul Pierce. I really think he's had a huge impact on these guys off the court as much as on the court, and I think we're seeing it with John Wall, too. I mean, there is a maturation process, but I think Pierce gets a lot of credit. All right, Cari, we're going to have to say goodbye to you. I know you have to. You're the hardest working person here at ESPN.
Yes.
You got to go somewhere, and you also have launched a podcast. Tell us about it.
I have. It is. It's pretty funny. It's a good podcast. I'm working with our producer, Josh. He does all the podcasts.
Yeah, you're right. You're the
all
second
the important ones.
You're the second hardest working person.
Yes, he's number one. Yeah. And so it's called Be Honest with Cari Champion, and it's I wrote an article in conjunction with the release of the podcast. And the article I wrote was Stuck in the Middle. It was about basically being in the middle seat of Skip and Stephen A. while the fight was happening and all the hype leading up to the fight, and how it really is a struggle to want to focus on the facts. And which facts do you talk about? Do you talk about the undefeated champion, or do you talk about his history of domestic violence? And so that was the inaugural podcast, and I had Michael Rappaport on. And the point of the podcast is to have personalities known and well known. This coming week we'll have Charles Barkley, who are straight shooters, who, they don't sugarcoat anything, right or wrong. You will hear what they have to say. And so I'll be talking to Charles Barkley, obviously, about the finals. He was at the fight, maybe something about the fight as well. But it's interesting because it's just going to be, because it's a podcast format, you have much more flexibility, and you can just say what comes to your mind with the help of editing. And it's really, I'm excited about it. Our first one was nice. Lots of room to grow. So it's called Be Honest with Cari Champion. It's on iTunes right now on the ESPN radio app. And obviously I will have my NBA Lockdown crew on as we get deeper into the finals. But I need them to come on a little tipsy. Is that possible? Because that's the only way I'm going to get Doug loose now. That's the only way I'm going to get him to tell me the real of what he thinks. What do you think? Josh, what do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea, Cari.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Beverages and Be Honest.
How often? Is this irregular schedule? You're not really.
It's a weekly podcast.
Okay, weekly. And so don't just go download, people. Subscribe.
Yes,
that's the big
subscribe
difference.
is the big deal. I need you to. Hey, Amin, are you available? And before Doug is on, can I get you before him? Is that possible? Because he's not listening right now.
I would be delighted. Delighted to be on.
All right, cool. I appreciate it, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
Cari, go get some sleep. You look horrible after this Vegas bender. You've been an absolute wreck. I'm being honest right now.
Good for you. Good for you.
You've been
Clearly,
a wreck.
I cannot look a wreck, you guys. You know that.
All right, Amin and I are going to return in 1 minute. Wrap up the San Antonio Spurs. It was an instant classic Saturday night, but was it the final chapter of one of the greatest sustained dynasties in NBA history? Remember, they won their first title in 1999, albeit with a Phil Jackson asterisk. We'll get into that in 1 minute here on the NBA Lockdown Podcast.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Back with you on the NBA Lockdown Podcast. I'm Doug Kezirian. We'll be joined in this moment by Amin Elhassan. Spurs eliminated in the first round. Contrary to what Doc Rivers handed out to all his players, there were a couple people that did pick the Clippers. Those were conveniently omitted. Arash picked them. I think
Ethan Strauss.
I want to say Ramona. I'm not 100% sure.
But I think Ramona did as well.
A couple people. That's it. Everyone picked the Spurs, and they looked good. Hey, give the Clippers credit. Not only did they win Game 7, but they won Game 4 in San Antonio and Game 6 in San Antonio. I tweeted it. I said, these are not your father's Clippers. The Clippers I grew up watching and laughing at in L.A. would not even have been in the playoffs, but would not have stepped up in that moment. And props to the Clippers. Both teams played well. Clips shot over 50% from the three, including some huge J.J. Redick and Matt Barnes threes. And Chris Paul, his bank three at the end of the third, loomed very large. He was 5 of 6 from downtown, playing with that hamstring injury. I hated the foul call on Tim Duncan, but all in all, you can't blame that. Clippers were the better team in the series and won it on the court in Game 7.
Yeah, no, I mean, let me say first, congratulations. They definitely earned it. They performed under the direst circumstances. But when we say I got Spurs in 7, obviously I'm not saying Clippers are garbage and have no chance of winning. What if it's Spurs in 7, and then my write-up says the Clippers have the best starting lineup in the NBA? I'm not here.
That's praising.
Exactly. So this idea that, they hand out the flowers and nobody believed in you. When most of those people, again, had Spurs in 7, if I'm not mistaken. There were some in 6, but most of them had them in 7. I think we're all acknowledging that if it reaches a Game 7, this is a fairly tight, scenario. But I get it. Doc is trying to motivate his guys and whatever kind of BS smokescreen he does to get that accomplished. All power to him.
It worked.
But it definitely worked. But looking at what the Clippers did, one of the things I said was, can they win 4 games before they run out of gas? Obviously they did. But more importantly, can they build a lead that's big enough that their bench can't blow? And if you go through, other than that game where Austin Rivers had the game of his life, they got almost nothing out of their bench beyond Jamal Crawford. I went through and I looked. I think their bench accounted for less than 20% of their points scored in 4 out of the 7 games, and including the last 3. So, that's great, and they definitely survived and won and earned it. And Chris Paul, I tweeted this before Game 7. I said, if you think that Chris Paul isn't clutch, you need to just go ahead and slap yourself because you haven't been watching. But there's a cumulative effect here, Doug. That's what I worry about the Clippers. You got this great win, awesome. Now you got to go play Houston. And Chris Paul's hobbled, and somebody's got to guard James Harden. I'm not particularly sure who that is because Matt Barnes is averaging 5 fouls per 36 minutes in the playoffs. This is going to be tough for the Clippers moving forward because, again, they don't have depth. Because, again, they don't have someone that can turn to once, if a guy like Chris Paul isn't available. We talked about the Grizzlies struggling without Mike Conley. You don't want to know what the Clippers look like without Chris Paul, because that's really ugly.
Yeah, and I still haven't figured out why Hudson doesn't play ahead of Rivers, but that's a conversation for another day.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Chris Paul, fantastic performance. I think the Rockets blow him out tonight. I don't even think it's close, with or without Paul. I just think that's too quick of a turnaround, too emotionally drained. They'll give him game one, but especially if Chris Paul doesn't play. I think the Clippers are the better team, but we'll see about Chris Paul's health. By the way, I watched the game because I did NBA Tonight on Saturday night. Watched the game with Ryan Russillo, who is a huge Chris Paul backer, and rightfully so. And he hates it that people criticize Paul and clutch or whatever. And I really enjoyed watching him down the stretch, kind of willing CP3's hamstring to health, and then obviously the game winner with 1 second to go. So we'll table the Clippers talk later. Obviously, they play game one tonight of the conference semis, but this also means for the fifth time in NBA history in the current format, a defending champ is eliminated in the first round. Given Tim Duncan is 39 years old. However, he did put up, I believe, 27 and 11. And Manu Ginobili's 37. We're not even sure about Greg Popovich's future. What happens moving forward to this Spurs squad?
Ooh, I mean, a lot of decisions. They have some flexibility. I think the stat is they got 5 guys on guaranteed deals next year. Most of them guys like Bonner, Duncan, Ginobili. I can see them basically being brought back on very team-friendly deals to keep this thing going. The biggest question mark is Danny Green, because here's a guy who really hasn't made a ton of money in this league. The deal that he's coming off of right now was his first real money deal, where he was making $4 million or so. He's got a chance to earn upwards of $10 million per year this summer. And this probably is going to be his last deal. Remember, he came out in 2009, so that would make him about 28 now. So this next deal will take him into his 30s. So this is probably his last time to get big money. But getting big money probably does not help the Spurs in their attempt to add more talent, because we know this team, as it ages, they're going to need more and more production from somewhere else. I will say the funny thing about this, Doug, is if you look at all the Spurs, the ones who are aging and the ones who I don't know how much more they can give us, I wouldn't put Tim Duncan on that list. He's looked incredible. He looked like he could play 5 more years.
I know his PER numbers are like basically the same as his second year in the NBA in terms of playoff PER. It's ridiculous. And
I mean, did he look slow or out of place or unathletic or any of those things? I mean, did he look like the game?
Looked like he had one leg.
By?
It looked like he had one leg, but besides that, he looked great.
Man, I think it's really up to him and his patience level. Do you want to go through this grind again? Go through 82 games and the road trips and away from your kids and the workouts and the preventative exercises, that grind to get to the playoffs. That's the hard part for an old player.
Totally.
Once you get to this time,
they love playing the games. They love playing the games, but it's those extra stretching and rehab sessions between days, the nutritionists, all that nonsense. Here is Duncan. Now, keep in mind, he barely had minutes to digest that his season was over following the Game 7 loss. Here is Duncan post-game.
Is this the last that you've played in the NBA, or have you put any thought into coming back?
Yeah, I think it's a little early to think about that. Would you agree with Pop's statement that he expects you and Manu and himself to be back next season?
If that's what he said, that's what he said. I'm not making any statements thus far.
Well, Duncan is about as interesting as his clothes in those post-game press conferences, but that's what we love about him. He's old man Riverwalk. He's the big fundamental. He's Tim Duncan, and he's been Tim Duncan since he came onto the scene at Wake Forest and throughout his NBA career. And I don't think you want someone to make a decision at that moment. That was Brett Favre's biggest problem, is he always made those decisions fresh after his last game, and you just need to get away and decide after you've had a time to digest everything.
You know, the other thing is the off season is the other one, right? You go away, you may take a little trip somewhere, and then you come back and you say to yourself, do I really want to start getting these workouts in? Do I really want to start getting on that treadmill? All those questions you ask yourself. And then, that is kind of the prelude to the grind, because it's like, I have so much time, much better time spending time with my family and my friends and just enjoying the fruits of my labor. He's obviously made a lot of money in his career. As you get older, I think it becomes more of a tug of war between whether it's something that you want to do or something that you have to do. And I think when it switches from have to do to want to do, or excuse me, the opposite, I think that's when you figure out what I'm going to do. But I do want to say this, by the way. How awesome was it that even though they got eliminated, they still went out on the town in L.A. after Game 7?
And no surprise, Duncan's taking care of the young guys.
I mean that sincerely, man. That's awesome because to me, and I know I'm falling victim to the thing that I criticize people all the time, that when the Spurs do it, it's awesome. If any other team did it, we call them losers. But honestly, having been in that situation where you get eliminated in a tough series, it's pretty cool that they were able to keep life in perspective and enjoy one another's company one last time. Because as Danny Green told us, who knows, there might be a lot of changes next year.
No, the losers are the ones that go out before the Game 7. I have no problem with any team going out. I've been in that situation at a much, much smaller scale, high school, college. Particularly college, you do go out after your last game when you've been eliminated prematurely or whatever. That's the time to do it. So we'll keep an eye on Duncan. Bruce Bowen has talked about, you talked about the workouts, how legendary Duncan's workouts are in the offseason as to why he looks so good on the court at 39. So he'll have to decide if he wants to keep it up. But one thing I want to discuss, everyone has assumed Kawhi Leonard's going to re-sign in San Antonio. And I get it. He just looks like a Spur. He fits the Spurs mold. It makes sense. They can offer him a 5-year max of $90 million. But my thing is, I mean, the guy has only tweeted out twice in his life, so he doesn't say anything. He doesn't write anything. We don't know anything. We're all assuming, I think, a little too much, and I think it's a little premature because if Duncan and Pop go, then what incentive does he have to stay in San Antonio? If Pop is gone, the system and all of that, all the stuff that worked, there's no guarantee, and there's other teams and other contenders that might want to open up the checkbook. So he's a restricted free agent this summer. Right. But I'm just saying, let's not write this down in ink just yet.
You know what? It's a great point. For a guy who doesn't talk, we sure seem to assume a lot of things about him, about what he wants, what he likes, or whatever. But I will say this. He's a guy that we know. He's a guy that shies away from media attention. We know that, he's a good player and a great player in this system, but not necessarily a great individual talent, meaning I can't put him on the Sixers and he's just going to ball out and carry them even to a 500 record.
Right, he's not LeBron.
Playoffs. Yeah. So I can't imagine him leaving a city and an organization that values and cherishes his privacy like San Antonio. There's only a handful of organizations that operate with that level and also operate in a market where the media knows to stay an arm's length away. If he goes, let's say, to the Lakers, even if the Lakers say, yeah, Kawhi, we're not going to make you do anything you don't want to do, it's L.A. He can't help it. He's not going to be able to
That's a great point, but
avoid attention.
Will San Antonio let him have that arm's distance if Duncan goes, Ginobili goes, all the other guys go, and he's the max player and face of the franchise? I don't know. Well, I think you raised a great point.
Because Timmy's the face of the franchise, and it's not like they put him out there like that.
Okay, good point.
He's treated the same way. But I think if Pop leaves, I'd be shocked if the person they brought in, tried to switch everything. I'd be shocked if the person they pulled a Matt Doherty. Remember when Matt Doherty came in after Dean Circle, changed everything? Yeah, that's not happening in San Antonio. Like I'd be extremely shocked because even if Pop walks away, he's still going to be involved in the organization, decision making, and the direction of the organization. So for Kawhi, and then on top of all that, you add on they have the right of first refusal. So that kills.
Yeah, he maybe do 1 year and then wait for the big time next summer. Although he did have a lot of injuries this year, and that may scare him from doing rolling the dice that way. I just wanted to throw it out there, and I said we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit on this situation. I don't know anything. But I'm just reminding everyone that none of us really know anything.
That's a nice way to put a bow on this episode. We know nothing.
Other than he's got massive hands and an extremely long wingspan.
Yeah,
and he's the defensive player of the year. All right, I mean, that's going to do it. Obviously, great weekend of hoops. We're moving on to the second round. It began yesterday, 2 games tonight in the association, and we'll be back tomorrow on the NBA Lockdown podcast. For Cari Champion, I'm sorry, go ahead.
One last thing. If you're a fan of the Patino game, and I know you guys all are, check out my Twitter feed today. We just posted the trailer for Patino Game, the movie, coming soon to a device, a mobile device, a laptop, or even a TV screen near you.
All right, so we're unveiling all sorts of things here on the NBA Lockdown podcast. Your Patino Game movie trailer, Cari's new podcast, Be Honest. So go check that out. Thanks to Cari Champion. Thanks to Amin Elhassan. I am Doug Kezirian. We'll be back with you tomorrow here on the NBA Lockdown podcast.
Thanks for listening to NBA Lockdown on ESPN Radio. For more great podcasts, check out the Pod Center page on ESPNradio.com.